Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, if you happen to be joining late. Welcome to the IT Hour. I'm Becky Scott. I'm joined with Alexa, Tom, and our guest, Patrick. Happy Friday.
Happy
We
Friday.
are, yes,
Deep breath.
yes. Let it out.
I was going to say, it's been a long week. We got some, very pleasant news from Apple this week that there is macOS Ventura on Monday, but that's meant that I've been in high gear getting ready.
Tom has been,
I
yes.
was going to say, I've put the pedal down and, we're really kind of charging forward, but that's meant lots of late nights for me as we get everything ready. So I'm very glad it's Friday. I was going to say I had PT this morning, and so I was working with my PT on my knees and went and got coffee afterwards. And I had my brief moment of zen outside in the fall air with my big cup of coffee. And I'm very happy it's Friday.
I hope you unplug this weekend.
That's the plan. If everything gets across the line today, like I hope it does, it's my intention to do some time with the friends, hang out on my bike. It's supposed to be gorgeous here in DC this weekend, so looking forward to that.
I'm going to Boston, and I'm hoping that it's gorgeous there too. I'm hoping the leaves hang on just a little bit longer so that I can.
Leaf peeping.
Yes, I'm hoping that the public garden and the common are nice and beautiful. Hang on just a little bit longer. Alexa, anything fun this weekend?
Well, Becky, this will shock you, but I'm going to a wedding.
What? No, not you.
I know. Yeah, this is my 5th one of the year.
Oh my!
Won't be my last. But no, I'm excited. It's in town, so no traveling, so it'll be nice and easy. But it's a friend from college, so it'll be a good time, little reunion. A shocker, right? But yeah, no, I'm excited. So I've got some friends coming into town. It'll be good to see people.
And didn't you have like a festival last weekend?
It did, yes. Fall for Greenville. It was the best time. Lots of food, lots of beer, which we lovingly call street beers because they closed down all of Main Street. You just take your beer and you enjoy the music. They have like 10 stages set up around town, and it's a lot of fun. It's very crowded, but the weather was absolutely beautiful.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, just good times.
It reminds me of street scene in San Diego. I used to go back in the day, and they had a ton of stages closed out all of downtown and just tons of music and live everything. And yeah, lots of fun. I miss those days. Rob hasn't been to 5 weddings in 42 years. Well, Rob, you're behind the times.
Yeah, you need more friends, Rob. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll say a lot of these weddings were delayed because of COVID. I feel like in a regular year, I wouldn't have had quite this many.
Yeah. Well, we've got some fun in store for you today, and we're going to mix things up a little bit like we did last week. We're going to start with our topic. We have Patrick from CrowdStrike here, and he and Tom are going to talk about SecOps and IT Ops and securing your environments. And it's Cybersecurity Month, so we're going to continue to talk about security until you're sick of it. No, none of us are going to get sick about security, right? We all want to secure our environments. Of course.
That's right. I mean, that's the scary part, right? Like that's the risk that we're all taking, just by using computers. Because, I frequently joke in my meetings that computers were a terrible mistake, but they have awesome, positive consequences. So we keep using them. But, Patrick, thank you so much for joining us here. I'd love to get a little to introduce you more properly. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about what you do at CrowdStrike.
Thank you, Tom. First off, I appreciate y'all having me on here. It's great, especially with Cybersecurity Month, that we're really starting to narrow down into key cybersecurity goals, reducing risk, addressing it across the whole, especially as we're coming up on the holidays when oftentimes when we'd like to be relaxing, we have to deal with fires popping up, which is never fun. That being said, though, everyone, my name is Patrick Meagher. I'm an engineer here at CrowdStrike, and I have been working here a little over 3 years now. Honestly, as people are catching up with weddings from that extended time bubble we had, I am trying to keep track of the time I've had, but it's been a wonderful, wonderful time for me as I have been primarily focused on giving demonstrations of our solution, really assisting in initial implementation, understanding security risks, goal sets, and how we might be able to assist with that and really meet an organization's needs for security in their environment today to, well, ideally look for a brighter future forward.
Awesome. Well, if we look at the current moment, here it's Cybersecurity Month, so we're all talking about cybersecurity awareness. How do you see the threat landscape right now for IT administrators?
Ever changing. It's one of those things where everybody's looking at it. All you see is a bleak outcome, and that doesn't have to be the case. We have a world that's ever changing, making it harder for us to keep up with these threats, requiring us to do more and enabling really speed to identify, to respond, and of course, critically to mitigate, to address these threats, reduce that by cutting down the attack surface as a whole and allowing us to spend more time when the above and beyond occurs, not if, because unfortunately there's always new things popping up. If you haven't seen the news recently, I highly suggest it's constantly going to be popping up with new stuff, but in turn allowing us to respond and really have that better sleep at the end of the day, knowing that we have the processes, the people, the technology in place, and really a cohesive ecosystem to address it all.
Mm-hmm. And so, from that perspective, what are the biggest threats for any organization right now for cybersecurity, for that perspective?
Yeah, ultimately, there are quite a few major threats out there today. I guess the number one thing to note is really the change in the ecosystem that we see, how we've had to grow and adapt to the world, moving to oftentimes either hybrid or remote workforce, and in turn changing a lot of aspects of where we could implement security. Key areas, of course, are going to be around general vulnerabilities, the ever-changing threat of phishing, social engineering, and then recently there's been an alarming increase in one trend I'd like to talk about today. I'm quite excited about it. I'm not sure if I should wait a little bit longer, but I do have a brief presentation I'd love to share with everyone. I have always been adamant about avoiding PowerPoint slide decks or slide presentations as a whole. It's the bane of what I do, but it seemed as though it'd be the most appropriate medium for today's conversation and really visualizing what that is.
Well, let's dive in then. Let's take a look at the deck and get started.
Perfect. Well, with that being said, bear with me here as I share my screen. Of course, it's being a Friday, I can enjoy my coffee, but I'm sure I'm going to run into some minor technical issues here or there.
I was going to say the demo gods are never kind. And getting the screen share right on a crowdcast is always an adventure. Don't get me wrong. So fire it up. Let's get rolling.
Perfect. Well, we're going down this adventure together. I guess
that's right.
Here. Is my screen showing up for us here?
Yes, I see us on the screen.
We're in their favor as of now then.
All right.
So I guess as I dive into this, before I really talk about the emerging trend that we see in cybersecurity, this alarming increase, I do want to give a little foundation of kind of who CrowdStrike is for anyone who hasn't heard about us before. But effectively, we are the company that pioneered cloud-delivered endpoint protection. We are constantly working to revolutionize with innovations here to provide the protection, to secure our devices across the whole, and to be able to effectively respond in an efficient manner when necessary. Now, one critical part of these innovations that we've driven is also going to come into why we are knowledgeable about the topic today. And that is our overall understanding of the threat landscape. It comes down from a key focus on intelligence today, going beyond just malware and seeing it as a problem, but rather looking at malware as being the result of the true problem, which is the adversaries out there. They're constantly adapting an ever-changing approach to attack us. The risk surface that we constantly have to keep up with to adapt to a remote workforce or new technologies as we move into the cloud, and the list goes on. Overall, with that, though, what we have driven ourselves to do is to understand them, to know who they are, what motivates them, overall what they want to achieve, and really what they need to do to achieve it. Using that level of understanding and then applying it to everything we do today and our mission of stopping breaches. It's moving on from there. I've already kind of given an intro of myself, so this may be a little bit repetitive. I'll show a picture of myself back when I was in office, and my hair was a little bit more cut, which is why I'm wearing a hat today. I guess moving on from this space, though, I would like to really quickly, before I get into that general breakdown of that trend we see today, address that JumpCloud has been named as CrowdStrike's Store and Falcon Fund Partner, Ecosystem Emerging Partner of the Year. This is something that I'm not surprised of in the least, but overall, this is something that was granted based off superb commitment and effort to deliver seamless OS patching and full disk encryption across their devices. And this is something that I mentioned I'm not surprised about, as when I look back on JumpCloud and my knowledge set of them, it all started quite a few years ago. as we're recently getting into that space of a remote workforce and hybrid, I was chatting with and ultimately working together with organizations to understand what challenges were they facing. And while my focus was primarily on security, a big portion of this was ensuring that they could get security out to these devices and to be able to enforce any kind of patching or risk reduction and mitigation on the devices through management after the fact to reduce that surface. The one thing I constantly found is that organizations for the longest time were unable to find something to do this across Windows, Mac, and Linux seamlessly.
Right.
And on top of that, to do it without relying on being on premise and hardware. It was just nonstop pulling hair out. One day, long story short, somebody told me about JumpCloud. And I was like, wow, that's an interesting name. Let me look into it. And I did. I found out all the wonderful things they do. And I had this great example given by this individual I was working with, breaking down how it's helped them today. And from that day forward, if anybody had asked me, what do I suggest? What do I see organizations really implementing to address all three, to centralize that and move it from a remote state of management? JumpCloud is one that came to mind. And I've constantly seen this combination, this kind of 1-2 punch for security, going at it together for a better outcome, JumpCloud and CrowdStrike together. So I was very excited when I found out that we became partners officially. And then, of course, from this really action that we're doing together to secure environments and assist organizations with the challenges they may be facing. Now, I could go on that for hours. I've loved working with the JumpCloud team. But I guess to move on, when we're talking about the threat landscape, the one key word that stays consistent is acceleration. The volume, complexity, and proliferation of these cyber attacks has been advancing at an increasing pace nonstop. And as we're looking at our world, as it's become more digitally connected and less reliant on being in isolated networks here or there, but trying to just carry out our day-to-day operations and what we need to keep the world we know flowing, well, new security risks have arisen. And because of this, and because of this constant drive from these cybercrime individuals to carry out malicious intent, to ultimately achieve their goals, whether that be for monetization, reflection, nation state backed goals or themes that they have, what we find is just that there is nowhere we can hide. This scale and sophistication we've seen is something that we merely just need to prepare for, to reduce the risk of, and ultimately be prepared for when that above and beyond that occurs. Especially when we're looking at it and see that, years ago, when we're looking at more opportunistic threats, it might take days or weeks for attackers to gain a foothold and carry out damage. And as we see this move into this modern attack landscape and the advanced attacks that we're seeing today, it's shortened this time frame to hours or minutes. And of course, it's specifically affecting in this new world, the remote workforce, the cloud workloads, the identity domain, and of course, more. And because of this and the general view that we're seeing, it's not an unlucky few coming under attack, but it's truly coming to this point of not if, but when, few, but all, that we really need to find a way to accelerate what we're doing, to be able to address this as defenders and increase our ability to identify, respond, mitigate, and enforce across the board. Now, there are many, many aspects that are key to this and what we'd like to do for an overall mature security standpoint. Today, the one I specifically wanted to focus on is going to be around that identity space. And the reason for that is because of this over-alarm trend we've seen based off Forrester's research right here. 80% of data breaches have had a connection to compromised privileged credentials. At first you think about that and it's like, oh, it's nobody's password. Maybe that's not concerning immediately, but it's so easy for credentials to be compromised or to be misused. On the compromised side, if you look at people, you chat with them day to day about what they do. Well, we've constantly had to change our passwords with time limitations or make them more complex. What does this lead to? Well, it leads to one password being used across the board by an individual that they may be using on less secure websites on their personal side, and they're also using it on their work side. And don't get me started, that gives me anxiety as it is. Or, add an exclamation point and all of a sudden I'm secure. Clearly, we can see that is not the case. But the leading to longer time to detect these as identified within the cost of breach report, and ultimately the ability to inherently stop things as it comes in through this really faded methodology where the computer itself is just saying, hey, I see this identity. It's checking in, appropriate account, appropriate password. Let's let them through. Since we see the misuse of this increasing today, we also see that component, that speed and time of these attacks speeding up as a whole, shortening the time frame of what it takes those adversaries to carry out their malicious intent. A key metric I'd like to identify within this space is the breakout time. I should note with the breakout time that it itself is referring to the time it takes for an adversary to move laterally from one device to another. And the reason that is critical is when looking at the attack surface and ultimately the attack chain of adversaries, unlike the movies and that I've gotten access, I'm going to do immediately bad stuff, that typically isn't the case. What we really see is that these organizations that are sophisticated, putting a lot of time and effort into developing these new methodologies to attack, well, they want to get their money's worth. So it's not just a single device they want to get to, but they want to use that and move laterally. They want to spread this infection until they see the value of what they've put in achieved prior to carrying out the actual impact of it. So that is why we identify this breakout time as so critical in understanding the speed it takes them laterally, and in turn, the speed we'd expect them to carry out impact. It also results in the speed that we need to stop them with. Now, with this 2018, we saw a breakout time of 9 hours and 42 minutes really coming in there. As this has moved on, our world has changed. Mechanisms we have to deal with and overcome have changed. 2021, we've seen that breakout time go down to 1 hour and 38 minutes, which is honestly terrifying when we consider the average remediation timeline for InfoSec teams in 2021 at 162 hours. Now, there are quite a few different ways we need to address that. The key aspect I want to talk about is going to be about that identity portion, the misuse of legitimate identities today, as we do see this overwhelming trend moving into the attack surface is speeding up the capability of adversaries. Another way to really look at this as well, at the 2023 timeframe, is an expected decrease of about 14 minutes here in that breakout time. And this is something that will be reflected by the new methodologies used by these adversaries. Excuse me as I fight with my slides here. And overall, the intrusion trends, in this case, as we can look at 2021. Breaking down this kill chain, initial access, execution, persistence, privilege escalation, defense evasion, a lot of things we, of course, don't want to happen. But the overwhelming trend we see up across the top here is valid accounts. It's awful. We can't just get rid of our user accounts. we can't go about our day to day. So addressing this really comes about in a couple of different means that we'll highlight a bit later. But to really reiterate and help visualize why this is so critical, I want to break down that kill chain in a much more digestible means. As we see adversaries traditionally would start with initial access. From there, they're going to carry out discovery to understand the value of a device, understand what they have gotten access to at this point in time and what they potentially do with it or move laterally to next. Following up with that, they're going to want to carry out privilege escalation, allow them to achieve a lot more of their goal sets, establish persistence in much more effective means, following that up with credential access, rather than many mechanisms to really move about, lateral movement to get that broader infection. And then once again, as they've identified that value has been met, carrying out impact. This is typically where we start hearing those news stories, exfiltration of data or of it, the big ticket thing we see in the news nonstop, ransomware. Of course, we want to stop it well before it gets there. And because of this alarming trend, we found this to be a lot more difficult. Having access to these identities is effectively keys to the enterprise. It's terrifying to think about. Honestly, being able to use this allows them to skip what we traditionally see within that kill chain, starting directly at lateral movement and, of course, resulting with impact after. And this is something we want to address. So with this, there are a couple of goals I've really identified are key to address this going forward in the future. And I wanted to highlight specifically how CrowdStrike and JumpCloud work together and can help your organization meet this. To start off, though, the first one is enforcing zero trust. Of course, zero trust, it's one of those things where you don't just get zero trust in one day. It's something we're constantly working towards. It's a mindset to never just trust something, to always verify. And of course, to have the checks and balances in place. On the CrowdStrike side, we have our identity protection and zero trust offering, be able to identify where we see potential misconfigurations with an Active Directory, the steps to mitigate them, the entities they really apply to. Things such as compromised passwords, stale accounts, and then through JumpCloud's identity, device, and access management, the ability to enforce multi-factor authentication on this to be able to centralize identities to one single location across many identity stores, and really speeding up the ability to carry out these actions and ensure you're not missing this visibility. As ultimately, one of the biggest issues with security today is not being able to see what's going on. Now, I do want to reiterate, I'm not an expert on JumpCloud's technology. So other aspects of this, I'm sure, can be presented in specific use cases, and I would lean on the JumpCloud side for that. But I do want to highlight really where I have seen organizations combine us in that together approach to protect and to really achieve an overall more efficient stack through security and IT today. The other portion, though, identify and reducing risks. There's quite a few different pieces we can do this to. It really depends on the nature of your organization, what may be applicable here. But once again, identity protection, as was identified there. Discover, which is IT hygiene to assist checks and balances, discovery of assets, ensuring we don't have a weak link in the chain or some outstanding, inherently risky configuration present. Our vulnerability assessment through Spotlight, and diving into cloud security posture management with our Horizon offering. Of course, pairing directly here with JumpCloud's cloud directory offering, multi-factor authentication, device management, ensuring that we're enforcing full disk encryption across the board there, patch management and automating the ability to do that, so you don't have to take hours out of your day when you're already full up with many hats you're wearing and fires you have to put out on the daily. And then overall, a general concept that applies across the board is just to be adaptable and resilient. If there's anything that we learned from these previous years, it's that the world is constantly changing and it forces us to keep up with it. We saw that push to remote workforce and not relying on technology on premise. We needed to be able to centrally manage what we're doing overall, to be able to unify our controls and tool sets, and really looking forward towards the future, adapt to the threat landscape and the needs to address these threats, and overall implementation throughout the environment. So once again, very, very excited to be partnering with JumpCloud here and see this work that I've been seeing occur from organizations using us together for their stack, making life easier, officially become a thing. Before I talk about that anymore, because I go any further, one thing I did want to quickly highlight for those that aren't as familiar with CrowdStrike is the different areas that we do cover today. I'm not trying to bore you once again with the slide deck, so I'll be very brief with this, but overall the solutions we provide across the board would be security around endpoint and cloud, managed services, security and IT operations, threat intelligence, identity protection, log management, the list goes on. But overall, what we want to do is to be able to provide this across the board with a lightweight agent. You're not having to piece together multiple different technologies and hope everything plays nicely. And also ensuring that you get that unified approach, just like JumpCloud does, as I mentioned, pulling in Windows, Mac, and Linux and giving you one central way to do it. We're there trying to protect workstations, servers, virtual machines, containers, cloud, mobile, and IoT. A little deeper of a breakdown. If any of these are of interest to you, I do want to note you should absolutely reach out to our teams here, get a demonstration of the platform. You can get a more targeted threat intelligence update and risk surface of what we're seeing today. And of course, looking at a fancy car is wonderful. Driving it's better. So if anything up here looks like a security project you're working on, something you'd like to advance in your maturity in the security suite as a whole, you can always test it. Always want to make sure you test it out, make sure it's a good fit for your environment. And then one final thing here, general wide CrowdStrike, key things we see are improving protection, really gaining better expertise. If you're looking to augment your security goals as a whole today, oftentimes we see organizations wearing way too many hats that want to do all they can for security but don't have the time. You can't get that 24/7 approach, and we can, of course, help and streamline that. Reducing complexity across multiple platforms, multiple agents and architectures. It just makes everything a headache and ends up being the counter of what we're looking to do. And then, of course, getting immediate value. Being able to deploy this out in minutes, especially if you're using JumpCloud right there. I've seen people deploy out to their entire fleet in under 20 minutes, knowing that everything is better going forward. It's absolutely wonderful to see. That is really what I had as a presentation today. I don't hear any snoring, which is good.
Yeah.
I apologize once again for the slide deck, but it really was the best meeting for what I could present today. And if any questions arise, please throw them at me. If you'd like to get a further demonstration on specific areas or to test out the solution, we're here to help as well.
Yeah, I was going to say we did have comments from from one of the people in the audience who's like, hey, most of our customers aren't really there yet to where they really feel like they could use or need the Falcon suite of tools. What generally do you say to customers like that are maybe a little bit more resistant or feel they're not ready?
Yeah, the number one thing with that is I don't see security as we're not ready for it. It's what can we do today about it? And our solution is designed with one thing in mind. We want to be able to assist organizations of any size. I really hate this terminology, but it's really designed to take off workload, fine tuning, and management. So it really can be within that set it and forget it space. If I don't suggest forgetting it, because the other key portion there is we're always going to guarantee visibility around it. You're never going to wonder what else. You don't just get a detection and say what happened, but instead you can dive into that, see what we saw, what we did to protect, and then specifically around that, what did your end user do wrong here? Beyond them and their typical story of I did nothing and I'm perfect. Not to target any good ones out there, but that tends to be a general theme. And with this, the solution is built off of that single agent. So if there are certain aspects that don't apply to your environment today, it is all a la carte. You get what works, what you need, what will help you with your security goals, compliance needs, and you can grow into other aspects down the line as appropriate. If you are really looking to get a better breakdown of this, please reach out to our team. We can take a deeper dive into the platform and highlight what will really align with certain security goals and how we see a phased approach come into play here.
And it feels like in a lot of cases, using tools like this is all about, it's a pound. What is it? An ounce of prevention it is worth a pound of cure. We think about these kind of things as ways to de-risk your environment from external actors, from accidental action, from all sorts of things along those lines. Tell me a little bit about how Falcon can help identify those kind of threats in environments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, across the board, the number one thing is we want to stop threats. But of course, with this, there's a healthy medium that needs to be found in addressing threats, but ensuring when we look at things that are, maybe odd or abnormal, that we are stopping when they're being, carried out in a malicious means, but not our day-to-day operation. So when we're talking about this aspect of things that could be accidents, they could be benign activity, but we want to make sure we can stop them and have this checks and balances in place. That's where we really start to get into that EDR data portion, because that technology is designed to stop threats that are file-based or fileless, regardless of whether they're known inherently or unknown threats. It's looking for essentially malicious intent, to oversimplify it a little bit, and stopping that, but then reinforcing it with this checks and balances for that above and beyond, and ensuring that we can really augment that security goal by not just providing the data for it, but a team to carry out that threat hunting, to be able to highlight specifically if we see that above and beyond type threat, what are we seeing? What does it look like they're trying to do? So you're not losing time to go in and investigate. You can just immediately see, understand, and address. And of course, outside of that, we do have the option to offload that as well. Oftentimes we see that in organizations that are really building out their stack in the beginning, where they want to get to that security suite as soon as possible, that security maturity that they're looking for, that 100%. But it's hard to do for them currently, because either they've got to, go for technology and then try to find a way to staff it or make the most out of it, or they've got to go for a technology and hope it does it all, which we've seen does not work. There's always that elephant in the room of cybersecurity, that a technology will never be perfect. We build it to constantly improve, to adapt, to stop, but having those checks and balances, whether it's that threat hunting or the actual response in place, allows us to achieve it. And a lot of organizations, rather than having to worry about hiring, teaching, retaining massive teams to address this and get that 24/7 approach, will just onboard in that managed option. A lot of this would be a lot better to take a deeper dive into with a demonstration of the platform, really determine how it fits organizations, whether it's organizations that anybody here may be working with. So I would highly suggest that, as there are some aspects that are generalized across the board, but really risk surfaces, the needs, the wants, they all change and adapt.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for giving us the kind of the broad overview of the security landscape of 2022. I think that you're right. The time to compromise stat is kind of horrifying, not going to lie, especially when you think about the remediation timeframes being in close to a month. I mean, I did the general math. 162 hours, if those are business hours, is most of a month right there. That is 20 some odd working days, which is about a calendar month. Obviously, you think about the kind of, it's always harder to clean up from an event like that, because you have to figure out what can you trust at that point. How much of the system do I have to tear down and rebuild back up again? And so avoiding those kind of breaches is all about, preventing future work for yourself.
Absolutely. Being able to avoid those inherently, and then having that visibility to take a surgical approach, knowing with confidence what occurred, and then enforcing it with partnerships and tool sets here that can immediately go and address these configurations and risk surfaces, remove old applications because it's outdated, lost track with it, patch it all. It's all going to have to come together. It's one thing we really, really strive for at CrowdStrike is working together as a team, stopping these breaches as a whole. And that's something that needs to go beyond just individual organizations, but for our security landscape today. And of course, beyond that, everybody working within technology and constantly getting hit with new acronyms.
Yeah, I was going to say,
summarize it, the new acronym game.
I spent a few days at the Objective by the Sea conference a couple of weeks ago, and the number of acronyms I picked up from the security researcher crowd was substantial. I mean, just looking at the attack framework for Meagher and a bunch of other, things along those lines, I feel like it's another alphabet soup that we all have to learn. Yeah, just when we got done with learning all of TCP/IP and UDP and all of the network stack that we need to know, and then MDM, automated device enrollment, VPP, all of those things. Yeah, I was going to say it's acronym soup these days.
Absolutely. It reminds me of the Turbo Encabulator. If anybody's familiar with that. Hopefully I didn't use too many acronyms today.
No, I think you did great. I feel like that you spoke in a fairly plain English language here. Some specified jargon, obviously, but I was going to say that's how you're in an industry, is when you've got your own vocabulary to go along with it. But thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Before you go, though, we have a couple of comments and questions. Brandon is saying he'd love to see deeper API integration between JumpCloud and CrowdStrike. So thanks for the suggestion, Brandon. And we will pass that along and see what we can do. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And, Kelly is asking the really hard-hitting questions here. She wants to know what that empty Kallax shelf is for, and why is it each day the Lego Star Wars Advent Calendar?
You want to start, or should I?
Go for it. That's you.
This is my fiance telling me I need to organize more. And providing me with, we actually recently got engaged, by the way. So
Congratulations.
But providing me with a means of doing that. And then me being a little overloaded with work recently, because coming into the holidays, it's really drive time to lock things down. And the only thing I have in there so far is a tool set. So I completely accept all judgment on this space, and I will be working on that this weekend. I guess that's my weekend.
Well, thanks for being a good sport about it.
It's a totally open canvas, ready to be filled up. It can either be like a fun thing or intimidating, depending on your personality, right?
A little bit of both.
Yeah. As you can see, now that I'm on camera, you can see that mine is completely crammed full. So you have that to aspire to, I guess.
That's why I backed myself into a corner here, so there's nothing really to see. If you could see out here, wouldn't be as nice.
One of these days, we might force you to pick up and turn your camera around.
Oh boy,
no. Maybe we'll start a thread in the community around sharing your workspace pictures.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. But thanks again, Patrick. You're welcome to hang around and join the rest of the discussion. Or if you, I know it's a busy Friday for you. Sales engineers always have lots to do. So you're welcome to hop off, or you can hang around and enjoy the chat.
I appreciate that. I'd love to just hang around, enjoy the chat, and learn more. And if any questions pop up.
Yeah, absolutely. We have some really great people who get pretty fun in the chat here. So as you can see with Kelly's question about your your empty shelf. So Rob says, nope, gonna burn the place down. Yeah, I've been tempted with that with my garage, in previous places. I just look at it and go, oh, I just can't. So back to the rest of our agenda. Y'all know the drill. We're going to talk a little bit about community, a little bit about meetups, and product news. And then I think Tom found us some IT news, because I did not have the time or the spoons this week, but Tom's going to save the day this time. So thank you, Tom. So community update. Rob did have another question. He's back asking if anyone has attempted to deploy PowerShell to Macs via commands. So if you have any advice on that, we will link that, and please go chime in. And I'll be asking around for you on that as well, Rob. Jürgen has shared a Laps for Windows script to create a similar capability to what's in Microsoft's Laps for Win devices. And then inspired by that, Sean Song posted a magical command trigger webhook to pass in parameters. So got some really cool things going on in the community repo. If you have not looked over there, go take a look. Got some fun things going on there. And Chris Tate, part of our MSP team, has started an MSP series. He's got part 1 and part 2 up, and I think he's got about 4 more planned, at least, talking about if you want to become an MSP, what that entails. So he's got some good stuff going on. Go check those out. As always, we will post a recap of the IT Hour and our show notes in the IT Hour group. And you don't have to be logged in to read those, so go check them out when we're done. Alexa,
Which reminds me, I think I'm a week behind on posting this, so
you are.
I will post both this afternoon. But yeah, meetups. It's a short and sweet update this week. Not really that much new from my previous updates. We are still pursuing our Raleigh, DC, and Chicago groups for November. We are just waiting to hear back from some venues to confirm those spaces, and then I will be posting those events in the platform. So stay tuned.
Did we talk last week about our special guest?
We did.
Okay,
yes.
I couldn't remember.
We did, but if you missed last week's IT Hour, there is some exciting news. Tom will be attending both the November Raleigh and the November Chicago meetup, in addition to, of course, the November DC meetup. So come hang out with Tom.
Busy guy.
Yeah, super excited to do those meetups here in November, and get in fun places. So looking forward to meeting everybody in Raleigh and seeing everybody here in DC. I think we should have a location here soon for the DC meetup. So that's exciting.
Yeah. Very cool. Woohoo! All right, and I think next up is Tom with product news.
Yeah. So I was going to say, first up, we've got a return of the better password complexity dialogue within JumpCloud. There is now a much better experience there for, the complexity of your JumpCloud passwords. We're really excited that you'll be able to see those, conditions actually met on screen as you type your new password. So look for that to roll out over the next week. We're bringing that out in tiers as we expand out the release criteria. So we're really excited to get that out there. This is incredible work done from our Voice of the Customer team. So it is really, really exciting. So that's fantastic. In addition, as I mentioned at the top, macOS Ventura is out on Monday. There are three new policies in JumpCloud to handle this for your macOS environments. You'll have an opportunity to delay major operating system upgrades if you're not ready yet. If you're not ready for Ventura, that's fine. You don't have to update on day one. You can, in fact, hide that update from your end users for 90 days. And so there is a new policy in JumpCloud that makes that available. In addition, should the user get a copy of the macOS Ventura installer application, you will be able to block that application from running. So if it comes down through another way, you've got a way to kind of handle that. So, deal with that, get those out there. Those policies can be deployed today. And you can deploy those out ahead of the release of macOS Ventura and be ready on day 0 to delay that access. Otherwise, you have instant beta testers inside your own environment. And that's my favorite part. That was always the thing, was that when somebody would upgrade ahead of time, ahead of its initial release through the beta program, great. As soon as you see that operating system on the screen, congratulations, you've joined the company beta program. You now get to test all of the software for us. Thanks. And it was a great place for that to be. In addition,
surprise.
Surprise. Yeah, that's exactly right. You didn't know you were signing up for that when you upgraded early, but you did. And I encourage everybody to take that approach if you do have people update. Those are your new canaries in the IT coal mine. And you should definitely check to make sure that all of your stuff is working on their environment. And if it's not, well, there's only one way back, and that's wipe. So sorry about that. But that is something you should take up with Apple. In addition, there's a brand new managed login items policy that is in the JumpCloud MDM. This will, as you may or may not be aware, macOS Ventura allows end users to be more in charge of their environment. Even if you're the IT person for that environment, they could do things like turn off JumpCloud or turn off Falcon or turn off any number of things if they're already an admin, and in some cases, if they aren't. So be ready with a login items policy for the key software that you need to apply. Just be aware that you should only assign it to devices that are running macOS 13. Once the payload is applied, if you apply it before they update, those settings will not apply to the device until it is reapplied after the update. So be aware about that. On macOS, the JumpCloud agent will be allow listed on any device that is running JumpCloud MDM. That will start on upgraded machines later today. So we're super excited about that. That's going to be a little bit of future proofing there. And if you're using another MDM with JumpCloud, check back on Monday when we release all of the documentation on how we support macOS Ventura. And you'll be able to download a profile directly from our site that will list all of JumpCloud's policies and objects on your devices that you can deploy with any other MDM. So we're here for all of our customers, whether you're using us for MDM or not. So know that that's available and out there. And that's the end of product news today.
Well, we have one question from Brandon. Any plans for time-based group access?
Not at this time. I can't share any more information. I'm not aware of any plans on that front at this time. However, I certainly would recommend that folks file feature requests. We have great tools at JumpCloud for managing feature requests and making sure that those allow us to upvote and downvote individual, product efforts that we're looking at expanding into.
Yes, please do that. And if more than one of you request it, the higher it floats.
That's right. Brandon also asks, how can we create a policy that only targets macOS 13? Well, that's a manual process today. There are certainly efforts underway at JumpCloud to, make more dynamic groups. And I would certainly accept any and all feature requests in this regard. If there's a part of its device's characteristics that you want to target specifically, I would love to hear use case and what you want to target in specific. So please drop me an email. I'm tom.bridge@jumpcloud.com. You can find me on the JumpCloud Lounge Slack. Drop me a DM. You can chat in the comments here. You can drop a post on the community. There are so many ways to reach Tom Bridge. And I look at all of them. So definitely very interested in definitions for smart groups. So very excited on that front.
You can tweet them. You can do all kinds of things. But really, JumpCloud email or Slack is probably best to reach official channels.
Correct.
But All
Well,
right.
and
So
that
I
kind
will.
of takes us to the news, right?
Yes, it does. Although Rob is saying only manual unless you install PowerShell and script that job, yo. Good advice, Rob.
I was going to say, great advice. JumpCloud has a really robust API. You can read our whole published API, all three of them, because we have version 1, version 2, and then a couple of the system context APIs are documented separately. You can find those at docs.jumpcloud.com. And you can make an API key right in your admin portal. That API key is a bearer token that you can then supply along with any curl requests. So, take a look at tools like Postman or Insomnia or any of those tools that'll help you shape the the API call.
And then once you script it, share it in the repo.
Yeah, share it and
the
share it
love.
in the community. That's a great way
Mhm.
to do those kind of things.
Absolutely. All right. So yeah, news. Tell us about Ignite.
Oh yeah, so Microsoft's Ignite annual event happened this last week, and so I posted a synopsis from our friends at Computer World, who have a really great synopsis of everything that we saw at Ignite 2022. The thing that kind of blew my mind was that licensing is the star of the show. How does this happen? That Microsoft licensing is so complicated that they need to go through the process of updating the process every year. And so there was a lengthy segment in Ignite this year on what your licenses do, what your licenses get you, how those kind of things fall apart together. So there are a lot of bits and bobs that go along with that. So in addition, if you're a Microsoft Teams shop, and I'm sorry, but no, wait, no, I wouldn't say that. I'm definitely not a Slack absolutist. But I have a lot of scars from when my son was doing school from home. And that was all they used was Teams, and it was very early in the Teams period. And there was a lot more dad doing tech support than kid doing learning, thanks to Teams. But there's a new version of Teams Premium that's out with this release. There's a lot of new things there, including custom templates, all sorts of new things for your organization to, collaborate together. So definitely encourage you, any Microsoft shops out there want to use Teams better. Teams Premium is a huge step forward. Now, if you just gotten used to calling it Microsoft Endpoint Manager, I have some bad news. It's called Intune again. So it went from being Intune to being Endpoint Manager to being Intune again. So if you're into Intune, there's a lot more new stuff in Intune. Their support for Apple platforms is now embracing the Apple Declarative Device Management. Their single sign-on extension is going towards platform SSO, but isn't quite there yet, and will be out of the preview stage as we get into late fall this year. So lots of really cool stuff there if you're in that ecosystem. Microsoft Ignite is always a great set of presentations. I watched a lot of really good presentations from Microsoft's folks. So it's very edifying, especially if you work in the Windows world, especially if you work in the Active Directory world. There are a lot of really great presentations, and they're free to watch. Second story came out of the, since it's Cybersecurity Month, I was really excited to see CISA Director Jen Easterly, who is actually, of all things, my neighbor's boss. She's putting out a big effort for CISA, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency here as part of the Department of Homeland Security here in the United States. And CISA has a big effort next year to focus on 3 major areas and shoring up security in 3 major areas: water systems, education environments, and health sectors. So, if in terms of vulnerable areas, there's 3 big areas that just don't have a lot of resources, that probably don't have deep and abiding cybersecurity teams. My son is a student at DC Public Schools, and DC Public Schools is a great organization that probably does not have a 10-person cybersecurity department. They might have a cybersecurity consultant part-time, right? Having more resources for these organizations is really going to be powerful.
So I can speak to the water thing because I've been involved with an organization that speaks about water and security for a few years. There's actually, a few conferences a year about this. And yes, they have been begging for a really long time to have more security around these, because there's outdated infrastructure. A lot of water is run by, small municipalities, right? And there's not a grid like there is for electrical and stuff. And so they are rife for, physical security problems as well as cybersecurity problems. And and plus they have an older workforce. And so they are looking at a lot of people retiring very soon, or they are in the midst of retiring. So there's a lot going on there. And I've been involved with some friends in those conferences for the last 5, 6, 7 years. So if you're interested in getting involved with stuff like that, there are actually conferences and things going on around that. And also oh no, the name of the organization is, I'm blanking on it right now, but it's through the FBI, and they actually have a group that involves industry around briefings and things like that on all kinds of sectors. It could be water, it could be cybersecurity, it could be technology, and all those. And InfraGard. InfraGard is the name of it, and anyone is eligible to join that as well. InfraGard.org, and I highly recommend that you join that if you can, because you will get updated on security issues a little bit early. You can get FBI briefings that maybe don't necessarily go out to the public all the time, and locally, you can actually get some really cool webinars and things. Sometimes you will get to go to live events where, the FBI and other agencies will tell you about incidents that have happened in the past that the public don't get to go to, but you might find out about a terrorist thing that happened, like a few years ago, and you'll get some extra insights into it that, will help you secure your business, believe it or not. So it's really interesting to join some of these organizations and learn some additional things that you might not get exposed to normally. So I highly recommend checking out things like that.
Fantastic. I think that's our news for the week, unless folks have, stories. But, as we get into spooky season,
that's right.
Do you have some a request for next week?
Next week, Alexa, do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I know we kind of actually talked about this a few weeks ago, but next week is the episode closest to Halloween. So next week's episode is going to be a spooky edition, and we are requesting that you all bring your scariest IT horror stories, and we are just going to sit around this metaphorical campfire and share some horror stories. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We'd love to have some of you, if you're willing, to come on screen and tell the story. But yeah,
I was going to say, I will try and see if I can drop in to tell my point of sale horror story, because I have a few of those, as well as maybe network security. Not even 100, like, network security 91 class, violations and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Kelly has said she wants to see costumes, so I guess I'm going to have to break out my witch's hat, because that's about all I have for a costume. So spoiler alert. Yep. I guess that's going to be either that, or I have some dragon wings I made for my son a long time ago, and that's about the extent of my repertoire, unless I go. So one year when I worked at the university, I was a random catnapper, and I wore pajamas and I had a pillow, and I would just walk into people's offices at random and just lay down on the floor and take a nap. And they would look at me and be like, "What the you doing?" I mean, it didn't matter if I knew them or not. I would just walk into their office and lay down on the floor with a blanket and a pillow, and it was hilarious. It was so much fun. But at home, I can't. What am I gonna do? Go lay down next to the cat? And they'd be like, "What are you?" It's not nearly as
Doesn't quite have the same
No, it
Yeah,
effect.
it's
doesn't.
not quite the same effect. Strong pull on the costume though.
Yeah, it was fun. So we might have to also have a thing in the lobby in the community and have you post your selfies of your own costumes for Halloween, since we
Definitely.
can't do it live, we'll have to do it virtually. So be prepared, because if you're going to ask us for our costumes, we're going to ask you for yours. So stories and costumes, be
There you
prepared
go.
for next week.
Patrick, I realized there was one big question I didn't ask. If folks want to get in touch with you after today, what's the best way for them to do that?
That is a great question. On that side, if you're looking to test out the solution, you can go directly to our website and you can start a trial. We'll also have contacts on there. You can reach out for general questions. I assume we're likely going to follow up with some form of email with further communication channels based off of specific things you're looking to chat about or dive into. But the rest of that, unfortunately, I don't have specific channels. I'm primarily just focused on giving demonstrations of the platform. So my apologies for not coming prepared with that. But once again, I do want to say thank you for having me here. This chat is a blast. I need to start tuning in to these IT hours because I haven't had this good of a laugh on an early Friday while I'm still digesting my coffee and a law.
Awesome. Thanks for coming today. It's a real pleasure to talk with you. We look forward to having you back at future episodes, and come join us on the chat anytime.
Oh, and by the way, I think, Patrick, are you going to be the one that is on the webinar that we're going to have next month?
Absolutely. Yes.
So Patrick will be back in a JumpCloud webinar about mid-November, I think. So be on the lookout for that as well. And with that, happy Friday. Have a good
Indeed.
weekend. Hope the weather is good for everyone. And we will see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.